Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the inaugural program of the three-day international webinar of the Naga Scholars Association. This is not the first international conference of the Naga scholars under the aegis of the NSA, but it's the first in this format. The pandemic has restricted us in many ways, but it has also necessitated the need to explore constructive ways in which we can use technology and continue our collective journey as scholars. And in this journey, sharing our research with our peers from time to time is an indispensable part of learning and self-growth. So welcome. Furthermore, the present format has largely freed the organizers of the financial and logistical hassles that come from organizing a conference physically. It has also facilitated a truly global representation in the conference, as we have speakers from India and abroad confirming their participation without the least hassle. So that is one good thing that has emerged from this situation created by the pandemic. The concept note is very clear that the objective of this conference is to envision a future for the Nagas. And that is the core, that is at the core of the conference. Many of the technical sessions lined up for the next 3 days envision not only robust academic interventions in bringing about radical change for the better in Naga society, but it also contemplates the political class working synergistically and in constructive cooperation with Naga thinkers and academics to maximize the outcome of the collective effort. In this context, the NSA is honored to welcome Sri Nephew Rio, the incumbent Chief Minister of Nagaland, as chief guest of this inaugural program. As head of the representative government in Nagaland, it is a privilege for us to listen to his perspective on the theme of the conference. NSA is also hopeful that the government will be receptive to the suggestions and recommendations that are expected to emerge from the discussions during this 3-day conference. Creating conditions for a better Naga society or a future is a collective responsibility, but the political class have greater responsibility in taking the lead because of the structure of our polity. NSA is also delighted to have Paul Pimomo, Professor Emeritus, Central Washington University, for agreeing to be the keynote speaker today. Professor Pimomo is a Naga, but has lived the majority of his earthly life in the United States. He is no stranger to the NSA and had spoken in the last international conference of the NSA as well. We are pleased to have you in our midst today, Professor, and we are also grateful for your support and passionate engagement with the initiatives of the NSA. Before we go into the program for today, William Arthur Ward once said, "Gratitude can transform common days into Thanksgivings, turn routine jobs into joy, and change ordinary opportunities into blessings." Invoking the guidance of the ancestor spirits before any great event is endemic to the Naga society or tradition. But post-Christianity, invoking the blessing of the divine before any event has become the cultural norm. So in keeping with that tradition, the organizers of this conference have selected some lines for invoking the divine's blessing. Please join with me in spirit as I recite them. You may shut your eyes if you wish to. May God bless our work as we pour knowledge into each other's mind. May we grow in wisdom and understanding. May this time together bring positive changes in our world. Amen. I'd like to also mention that the inaugural program is being recorded by Doctors D.K. Long Nathan and Solomon Zinkai. Now, without wasting any more time, I'd like to invite the president of the Naga Scholars Association, Dr. Yuchamo Yantan from the School of Social Sciences, IGNOU.
Thank you very much, Shelby. Honorable Chief Minister of Nagaland, Mr. Nephew Rio, Conference Keynote Speaker, Professor Paul Pimomo, distinguished scholars and academicians from different universities across the globe, and ladies and gentlemen, I, on behalf of the Naga Scholars Association, take this wonderful opportunity to welcome each and every one of you to our international webinar on the theme Living in the Present, Nagas in the 21st Century. We are extremely thankful to our Honorable Chief Minister of Nagaland, who is so kind enough to accept our invitation to grace the inaugural session of the international webinar as the chief guest. Our Honorable Chief Minister has been very supportive to our academic initiatives and is not new to our association. In fact, he had participated in some of the workshops of the NSA which we had conducted in the past. Thank you very much, sir, for taking out your time to be with us today. Well, NSA is also very thankful to Professor Bolby Momo, Professor Emeritus at Central Washington University, who has been extremely generous in sharing his ideas and perspectives and also has been providing us directions. Thank you very much, sir, for your constant support and cooperation. Well, when we took up the NSA leadership in 2009 and 2016, we dreamed of a moment like this where Naga scholars from across the globe to come together to share their works, exchange ideas, and to think together of a transformed Naga society. Today, I am convinced that dreams do come alive if we only believe in ourselves and channelize our energy towards that dream. This is indeed a historic moment for the Nagas. Well, in life, we face different challenges and situations. However, whatever may be the situation, we also have the creativity power to capitalize any situation to our advantage, like in such challenging times like the COVID-19, the NSA is capitalizing, the situation in organizing an international webinar when most people choose to wait for the pandemic to get over and just let the time go. Likewise, how do we capitalize the state of affair of our society is going through in the contemporary times? Do the Naga scholars have any alternatives to offer? We must introspect about on this. Well, we are living in a very challenging globalized society. There has never been a more important time in history to foster and develop a critical societies. With the dwindling of the earth's resources, with vast declines in natural habitats, with population expansion, with wars, hunger, unemployment, and a terrible pandemic situation like COVID-19, it is very vital that we turn things around and get them right. However, to fix the problems looming before us, there is one thing we must get command of, that is our thinking, because everything we do is determined by some thinking we do, and critical societies will emerge only to the extent that human thinking becomes a primary interest of people living in societies. Since the past decade, the NSA has been actively engaged in academic dialogues and conversations with some of the leading academic personalities and intellectuals in the country and across the globe. The NSA today is acknowledged as one of the most dynamic academic organizations in the country, having consistently engaged in academic discourses ranging from issues related to the state and the nation. Today, I am very much convinced that a thinking forum like the NSA can play a very vital role in societal building. And the kind of human resources we have with us today, we have the potential to develop our society into a critical thinking society that values critical thinking and perspective taking. The NSA Web conference has invited Naga researchers, thinkers, and practitioners from different universities across the globe to share the work, to interact with one another, and to reflect upon the challenges the Naga society is faced with in contemporary times. The theme, Living in the Present, implies an awareness and sensitivity to the current development of the 21st century. It also means envisioning ways in which constructive dialogues take into consideration ways to reflecting on the past, understanding the present, and working towards a shared future. It is a combination of these two strategies which will equip an indigenous society in transition, like the Naga society, to overcome the challenges we face. Nagas experience globalization and militarization simultaneously. This has meant sorting and coping with constant changes and sorting the changes that impinge upon Naga core values from those that enrich and expand us as a people and coping with the differences that the rapid changes have brought about among us. So, what constitutes a shared Naga identity today? How do we define Naga cultural values? And how do we negotiate from among the rich diversity and of traditions, values we cherish and consider worthy of inculcating in the present and carrying forward into the future? In a similar vein, how do we contextualize and unpack the material and political realities of the present? What conceptual grid, structural model of political economy or system of ethical responsibility and accountability can we reach for in these challenging times? Further, in an age and a world coming from the strains of extreme inequalities and environmental crisis, are there choices for indigenous societies, including the Nagas, other than to join the ranks of a new liberalism's global workforce? Do Naga traditional society and culture offer a better alternatives? Well, the main vision of the NSA International Webinar is to engage the Naga scholars throughout the world in a conversation on the state of the Naga people in the first quarter of the 21st century. The conference seeks to bring in some of the active scholars and thinkers for a meaningful dialogue with one another in the hopes of bringing interdisciplinary solutions to existing problems and brainstorming innovative pathways to the future. And some of the major sub-themes which will be discussed in this international webinar are civil society and social transformation, conflict resolution, identity and nationalism, environmental and climate change, heritage, practices and representation, gender equality and social justice, state policies and development, art and oral literature, health and society, religion and worldview, Naga peoplehood, information technology and digital learning tools, gender, laws and social change, diaspora and globalization, orality, tradition, and culture. The NSA conference will witness a total number of 64 research papers from different universities and institutions from across the globe. The entire conference is divided into two plenary sessions on civil society and social transformation, gender equality and social justice, and one panel discussion on Naga peoplehood and its challenges. 13 technical sessions where many eminent academicians will be presenting papers and also chairing the sessions, and several Naga Scholars Association members teaching in different universities and institutions will be engaged as session organizers And most importantly, the session will be covered by 31 very prominent and upcoming Naga researchers from some of the leading universities in India as rapporteurs. Well, we are very hopeful that the outcome of this international webinar will give us some directions and help us strengthen our community through dialogues and conversation. I once again thank all the resource persons, session organizers, and rapporteurs for coming forward to make this event a historic one. Thank you very much.
Thank you, President, for laying out the theme and sub-themes of the conference, and also for telling us what we expect from this conference, from this dialogue. Thank you very much. Now is the time for the chief guest to take his time and address us, uh, possibly, I think, on the theme. And, and after that, we would go into the keynote speaker, the keynote for today. So before we go into that, I'd like to now invite the chief guest for today, Sri Nefirio, the Chief Minister of Nagaland, to please take his time.
Good afternoon to everybody who is on this web conference.
Good afternoon.
Respected Chairman, Mr. Shami Sankhil, and President NSA, Luchamo Yantan, and the keynote speaker, Mr. Paul Pimomo, and other respected scholars, participants, ladies and gentlemen. I'm delighted and also privileged to be with you today in this Naga Scholars Association's International Web Conference, where Naga intellectuals from all over the world are gathering to deliberate on the theme, living in the present and Nagas in the 21st century. I believe this is an excellent topic for deliberation at this time, as we are now living in the world where we should be sensitive and be aware of various issues going on around the world. Today, there is a need to have meaningful discussion on what has happened in the past so that we can have better understanding on our role in the present situation and prepare ourselves to boldly face the future. This is also the time to have collective thoughts and prepare collective strategies so as to prepare our young society, which is in transition to modernity. I sincerely hope that new insight and roadmap for the future will definitely come through as our Naga researchers, thinkers, and experts from all over the world share your experiences and reflect on the changes we are now facing. Nagas have come a long way from headhunting days to embracing Christianity and adopting a learned, cultured, and democratic way of life. In the present age of globalization, it is very important to preserve our Naga identity and deliberate on how to take it forward into the future. For that, we need to understand and appreciate our Naga core principles and to discuss ways and means of preserving our Naga culture and balance our good traditional values with modern lifestyle. Today, we must deliberate on the present political scenario, social economic realities, and together work out suitable model to meet the challenges of our times. We also need to deliberate on issues such as health, education, unemployment issues, industries, power and energy, trade and commerce, arts, music and literature, sports, even gender and social justice, and of course, agriculture, deforestation, environment protection, and climate change, science and technology, information technology, and many, many more. I appreciate that during the course of your discussion, you are going to cover most of the important topics concerning the future of our people. And I'm sure you will be able to find out that in many ways, our Naga culture and tradition system may offer a good solution to the problems being faced by us. In the past, we were known to be egalitarian, friendly, hardworking, and self-reliant people. However, from being a self-reliant people, we have now become more or less dependent on the central government for almost everything. Naga society is in the making, and we need to be practical, in tune with the existing situations and the evolving world. We must excel as leaders, students, farmers, businessmen, entrepreneur, or whatever profession we are in, and move with changing times. It is time that we adapt ourselves with latest technology, missionaries, and become competitive people. And we also need to interpret our traditional values in today's context to make them relevant to our youth of the day. Nagas today are also at a crossroad where negotiations for Naga political solution is at a concluding stage, I believe. It is imperative that we join hands and strive together for an honorable solution for our people. In this regards, we must conduct ourselves on the high plane of dignity and discipline. It is equally necessary for Nagas to come together and learn to coexist in an atmosphere of peace and goodwill among ourselves and with our neighbors, so that we can move forward. Am I visible?
You're both visible and audible, sir.
Very much.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
The need of the hour is to sing our differences and work together. Today, we are administratively divided in different jurisdictions, but I'm confident that the march of democracy will bring us together again. We just have to be patient and continue to strive for oneness, along with a political future as one people. We also have to think about our economy Because today's world, we have to be self-sufficient. One problem we have in our society is with our privilege. Today, we are not used to paying taxes directly or indirectly. To this cannot go on forever, as privileges come with responsibilities. And because we don't pay, we don't understand and know what is economy. We have to learn to give to government in the form of duties and taxes, which in turn can be used for greater good of the people. This change, along with the robust work culture, is extremely crucial for the future of our economy. When we talk about self-sufficient, we often think of self-reliance in material sense. But we must also think of psychological self-reliance. Together, we must formulate new policies and programs. We must see that development works go on and Nagas progress in the right direction. The government of Nagaland is making tremendous efforts to improve the health sector, road, power, education, agri and allied sector, water supply, industrial, science and technologies, etc. And since our effort is being made to reach out to the remotest part of the state, also in the field of arts, music, and sports, the government is doing whatever is possible to nurture talent and offer opportunity to expose young talents to the national as well as international arena. Let me also take this opportunity to tell you how proud I am to see the community efforts made during the COVID-19 pandemic, where innovative ideas were introduced to services provided to the people, in line with the Naga community spirit of helping one another. I'm very much hopeful that Nagas of the 21st century are ready to take on challenges thrown upon us, and that together we will march on as proud, successful people. Let me end my speech with a quote from Winston Churchill, and I quote, "Let us therefore brace ourselves to our duties and so bear ourselves that if, I rephrase, the Naga lasts for 1,000 years, man will still say, this was their finest hour." So with this, I wish all of you the best in your deliberations and thank you for the opportunity. God bless Kugnalan. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for that very practical speech and message to us. We are grateful that you've taken the time to speak to us and also highlight the everyday difficulties that you encounter as an administrator. And we hope that together we will be able to create conditions that will produce a very vibrant Naga society. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We would like to now proceed into the keynote part of the program. So I'd like to invite the keynote speaker for today, Professor Paul Pimomo, who is Emeritus Professor of English at Central Washington University, USA. He retired from full-time teaching last year. He was educated in Northeast of India and the United States and taught in both countries. He taught post-colonial literature, British literature, literary theory, African American and human rights literature, and he has also published widely and in diverse fields, ranging from post-colonial studies to empathy studies in academic journals in the US, UK, India, the Netherlands, and Japan. He and his family now live in the American Northwest. Professor Paul Pimomo, please take your time.
Hello.
Yes.
You're
Okay.
audible.
Yes. Okay. I'm very well. Thank you very much for this opportunity. Can you hear me? I just want to make sure because I can't
Yes.
see myself on the screen.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Okay. So, ladies and gentlemen and fellow Nagas from around the world, the warmest greetings to all of you. I'm delighted to be here. And any one of you could have been here giving this keynote address. So it's a singular honor for me to be invited by the Naga Scholars Association to give this speech. And so I am very, very grateful. And I count it a privilege, although it is humbling, to be on the same virtual global stage with our Honorable Chief Minister, Mr. Nifirio, one of the most illustrious Naga politicians of our time. I have titled my talk, Nagas Living in the Present, Sovereignty as Nation Building. It has three short parts. The first introduces sovereignty as nation building. The middle section makes very brief references to the past, Naga nationalism, and to the present, Naga obsessions. The last section, I expand on nation building, the road ahead or the future. I'm not very sure whether I will have the time to cover all that, but here I go. And I have an epigraph, and this comes from Nikituiralu, and I'm quoting, "Sovereignty is the proper growth of a people in all areas of life," end of quote. The theme of this webinar, Living in the Present, enjoins me to talk about the state of Naga people in the present tense, which is impossible to do this year without reference to the highly contested ongoing Indo-Naga peace negotiations. One could offer the still unresolved political problem going back to 1947 as proof of India's lack of geopolitical vision in the region or inability to govern. But we could also talk about the problem as a Naga failure. The mistakes on both sides have accumulated over decades and are intertwined. And they are so intertwined, we could easily think of Indo-Naga relations as an unfortunate marriage with a long history of miscarriages, in which the baby-to-be, Naga sovereignty, has failed to arrive, much to the chagrin of the Nagas and to unrepentant guilt on India's part. This is a tough story to tell with no winners for now. So like the typical 21st century Naga, we can reach for a biblical parallel for instruction. This time to King Solomon and the two new mothers, each claiming that the one live baby as hers. For the government of India, baby Naga sovereignty is India's to keep. It is not negotiable. For Nagas, precious sovereignty belongs to us and should be ours for the taking. But because there's no wise King Solomon to adjudicate the Indo-Naga case, Nagas don't get to keep our baby. We must let India raise him for now, while fully knowing sovereignty belongs to us. In real terms then, as of now, it seems Nagas must be content with being an ethnic nation and a people with a unique history, which even India has officially acknowledged. Among the Nagas, however, sovereignty continues to be a major obstacle to unity. So, true to character and form, Nikitiorolu, a Naga elder and Christian Gandhian, has suggested re-examining the concept of sovereignty that Nagas have inherited from the colonial era. He offers a two-pronged approach. First, he argues that Nagas have given everything humanly possible in the circumstances to safeguard our sovereign right. But since it is India that has adamantly suppressed our aspiration, including by military force, the burden of Naga sovereignty is now in India's court, not in ours. I quote, "Nagas have done our part," he asserts. "Therefore, Naga sovereignty is now India's problem." End of quote. Nikitiorolu then proceeds to develop an organic concept of sovereignty. In NPMHR's webinar on nation building held last week, 20th of November, he offered a theory of indigenous Naga sovereignty, which he distinguished from the conventional Western concept of nation states. He grants that given the nation-state arrangement of the world we live in, a nation-state status would be a fulfillment of the Naga freedom movement. But nation-state is not a necessity for Nagas for the present, because, according to him, Naga tradition offers another model of sovereignty in which self-determination and self-rule are internally generated and achieved by the people, not externally conferred by others. Under this indigenous model of achieved sovereignty, Nagas don't need to be seated in the UN to be a sovereign people. We only need to retrieve the unwritten and lived sovereignty of our ancestors, for whom being free meant building a society, quote, for proper growth of a people in all areas of life, end of quote. The extent of Naga sovereignty was, of course, defined and limited by the abundance or limitations of time and place. But Nikitiorolu suggests that organically developed Naga sovereignty is the historic legacy whose time may have come for Nagas to implement again, while we put Western-style nation state on hold, and while also understanding that India take responsibility for suppressing the legitimate aspirations of the Nagas. What Irolu's proposition does is split the regimented narrative of Western sovereignty into two modes: the concept of a world divided into sacrosanct juridical nation states and an indigenous practice of transforming a people into a contingent nationhood. The two are not mutually exclusive in our world, but we can safely assume that a nation state which lacks the functioning homegrown process of self-rule has missed the forest for the trees. And that is what Irolu warns Nagas against. And this in turn brings up a fundamental political question present-day Nagas must confront. Are Nagas less of a people today because we lack the status of a sovereign nation state? Some will immediately dismiss this as a pointless rhetorical question with a foregone conclusion that Nagas would, of course, be more of a people with nation state than without. But I think the answer is not that obvious. For one, let's take history. Though Nagas have belonged to one ethnicity for as long back in time as we can go, in reality, that is, historically speaking, we never had a reason to organize ourselves into one administrative nation. It was our resistance to colonial rule that first engendered the idea of an organized Naga nationhood. Until then, the scores of self-governing and loosely connected, sometimes contentious Naga groups lived in the contiguous areas across two countries we live in today. and as of now, our first and only attempt at inclusive and unified peoplehood through the freedom movement has failed. The failure does not, of course, erase our common ethnic identity. Nagas are still a people and a nation, even more consciously than, let me repeat that, sorry. Nagas are still a people and a nation, even more consciously so than we were before the national movement. So the idea that Nagas are a lesser people today than we should be simply because we don't have a nation state with a seat in the UN is wrong. Anthropologically and historically speaking, it is wrong. And more significantly, politically self-defeating, especially at this time. For Nagas then, Western-style conferred sovereignty has only been an idea, a costly idea, and an unfulfilled dream, which we are not about to dismiss just yet. But a more realistic and practical approach to Naga sovereignty would be contingent on reality, one that will arise from the process of nation building among ourselves, or what the Inaugural calls sovereignty that is dedicated to the proper growth of a people in all areas of life, which we have yet to build. In other words, the way forward for us lies in implementing indigenous Naga sovereignty with what we have, where we are, and what we may be together as a people. For starters, it should be possible for us to agree on two things. First, stop arguing about conferred nation-state status because we don't have a choice at this time. It is not available. And we should certainly not kill one another because we disagree on how to get there. Secondly, we can postpone decision on what name to give our shared promised land until we arrive there. Agreement on these two issues would allow us to concentrate on nation building, a systematic construction of Naga national communities at local levels wherever Nagas are now, as well as a united community across states and international borders. A process of simultaneous nation building at these two levels can be led by an all-Naga civil society organization that represents the best interests of the entire Naga family, and the Nagaland state government, which, in the eyes of some, is the quote-unquote illegitimate child of the troubled Indo-Naga marriage, but which must now be properly adopted into the Naga national family and be given the responsibility to lead the Naga people on a path of transformative change for the common good. The currently separated parts of a society will each be a community in its place, but they will all be working together towards a togetherness, a we-ness in stages, shepherded and strategically supported by the two Naga entities, a pan-Naga civil organization and a Nagaland state giving the leadership. I will return to this all-important subject of nation building a little later. But first, a word about Naga nationalism that has brought us to this moment in our history. We're going to talk about Naga nationalism and obsessive culture. Scholars of nationalism have tried to identify and group nationalisms into types. In a recent study, Nationalism, A Short History, Leah Greenfeld comes up with three categories: Anglo-American, French, and Russian. This is not a session for parsing Naga nationalism, but studies like Greenfeld's allow us to see that Naga nationalism has no clear pedigree. It is a much nationalization, a hodgepodge, if you will. Nationalism has been the Naga political lifeblood, we understand, but one governing sentiment throughout our long history of nationalism has been that Naga tribes and groups cannot help loving and hating one another. It is the one remaining tenuous love-hate link that after our homeland have been split up into multiple states and administrative units. Another characteristic of Naga nationalism is that the tragedy of the long struggle and the lack of closure have given way to a culture of addictive substitutes in all areas of our society. In state politics, obsession with power, status, and money. Among NPGs, inability to let go of heroic dreams from the past, or temptations to yield to cynical selfish interests. For the Naga public, disillusionment and vicarious experience of nationhood and for the Naga public, a vicarious experience of nationhood that we earn but lack in reality. One hopes to be wrong in this case, but I think the decades of deep socio-political problems have engendered in Nagas cult-like ideological tendencies, divisions, and pathologies, whether they be in politics, intertribal relations, or religion, leading to states of emotional dependency, perhaps even of mental and physical addiction. Like other peoples of the world, Nagas have long wanted to live in the land that nature placed us together in peace and in collaboration with our neighbors, including India. But we have been denied the chance. And so one sometimes wonders if Nagas can be blamed for being obsessed with virtual nationhood in a world of nation states, among them India, who has fought tooth and nail to deprive us of it. I come now to Naga nation building in the 21st century. It would be clear from what I have said above that the survival of the Nagas as a people, now around or a little over is a 4 million in a world of 7.8 billion, does not depend on our debating whether or not Naga should be a sovereign nation state tailored for us by India or by the world. Our survival depends on our realizing that Nagas are a larger and better nation to be than we are now. We are a people's work in progress. So the two most relevant questions for Nagas to ask together are, what kind of a nation and people do we want to be? And how do we achieve what we want? And the answer lies in retooling the traditional Naga sovereignty and self-government for our real needs in the present. There are leaders and experts among you, obviously, including our Honorable Chief Minister here, who have much better ideas, and they are much more qualified than I am to figure this out. But here are some pointers towards a new Naga nation building. The list starts with conceptual resets, followed by practical suggestions. The first reset. Reset Naga society from nationalism to nation building along communitarian lines practiced by our ancestors that Nicotero has identified as indigenous Naga sovereignty. 2. Reset the concept of leadership from power and elite-centered careers to leadership for the common good. 3. Reset societal advancement from unexamined economic growth and endless competitive profit-making to collaborative and holistic well-being through a planned growth that is eco-friendly, and people-centered. 4. Reconstitute an all-Naga civil society, a body to function as socio-cultural morung across state and national borders. This umbrella body will provide this umbrella body would provide caring and dedicated leadership with a plan to bridge the divisions among Nagas and work towards nurturing mutual respect and unity across tribes, political parties, ideological differences, and matters of beliefs and faiths. 5. Reform Nagaland state structures and functioning, and with funding from Government of India, to function as the main engine for economic and societal progress on communitarian principles and values, not along new liberal capitalist lines that have created unsustainable inequalities in so many parts of the rest of the world, including where I'm living here in the United States. 6.
Professor
In
Paul,
real terms,
Professor Paul,
yes,
sorry, part of
yeah.
your face is covered by the paper. Can you please shift the paper
Oh,
a bit?
sorry. Am I seen now?
Right, we need to
Right.
see your handsome face, as you
But
present.
so am I visible now?
You're visible now. You're visible now. Yes, please, you may continue.
Okay. Yeah. I'm sorry about that. I had to read this thing because I couldn't just speak, right? So, okay, I'm back to reform Nagaland state, number 5 here. Reform Nagaland state structures and functioning, and with the funding from India, government of India, to function as the main engine for economic and societal progress for communitarian principles and values, not along new liberal capitalist lines that have created unsustainable inequalities in countries all over the world. 6. In real terms, holistic and sustainable development starts with basic needs, like, as the Chief Minister mentioned some time ago, a little while ago, good roads, clean water, electricity. So our webinar won't be disturbed, we can have constant flow of these facilities, universal health care, good public schools, food sufficiency. Some indigenous people call it food sovereignty, and ecological health of our entire homeland. These are necessary to any people's ability to produce goods and services and gainful employment, start businesses, create jobs, and become productive, creative, contributing members of society. Number 7, reform in politics and governance would include, at the very least, electoral reform, putting governance structures in place for effective implementation of the rule of law, inculcating a culture of professionalism, justice, and fair play, instituting an independent, non-partisan, professional accounting agency to monitor how public funds are spent, to hold departments and individuals accountable. The public accounting agency would have enforceable auditing, evaluative, and investigative powers. Government apparatuses would be retooled to service and resources should be directed or geared to community and village-based nation building. One of the reasons that the rule of law and advanced democracies are able to function according to rule of law and bring people to justice is because they have institutions like accountability departments or agencies that make sure that people do the right thing, because we know that human beings are not naturally angels. Number 8, public networking strategies would be developed by the Pan-Naga body and state government for collaborating with all Naga local governments, councils, and organizations, and for entering into and expanding on mutually beneficial collaboration with states in the region, as well as states across India and Myanmar, and for connecting with indigenous peoples around the world to safeguard human and environmental rights and promote cultural diversity. Number 9, in the cultural sphere, since we call ourselves a people, Nagas have got to learn more about one another in order to dialogue and for greater understanding. We could do this by working on what some historians and social scientists have suggested. Things like retrieving and assembling our oral cultures and traditions, writing, performing, and enacting in multimodal ways our lives and stories, successes as well as failures, including stories of our struggles for self-determination, because the self-determination story is very diverse. It's not just one unified story. Essentially then, Naga peoplehood and society in the 21st century would combine the best community values of traditional Naga life with efficient modern governance structures, namely a democratic communitarian society. You may have noticed that I have mentioned communitarian several times because I think that is the genius of our people, the traditions, a communitarian society and village, and we need to bring it back at a larger scale in modern ways and so on and so forth. The name of this serious and joyful work is nation building or patriotism, past sexism, tribalism, and bigotry, especially at a time when significant parts of the world are being plagued by a return to white nationalism in parts of Europe and the United States, and religious nationalism around the world, including Hindutva in India, as you very well know. We have hard but exciting work ahead of us for the rest of the 21st century, a century in which Nagas might achieve sovereignty together and also have sovereignty conferred on us by the world. Thank you very much, and Kuknalim.
Thank you, Professor Paul Pimomo, for the very engaging and insightful presentation. I am reminded of what Salman Rushdie said in The Imaginary Homelands, when he talked of the virtue of distance. He said how staying away from home provides the much needed perspective to look at things more objectively. NSA is grateful to you for the insightful presentation, and I hope the technical sessions to come today and in the next 2 days will be able to touch and dwell on some of the points you have suggested. Thank you very much. And I'd like to now we come to the close of the inaugural session. I'd like to invite Dr. Atiko Kaisa, who teaches sociology of media in the School of Social Sciences, Jamia Millia Islamia, Delhi, and who is also the co-convener of the...
Okay, I think Dr. Kais may take his time.
Thank you, President. I, on behalf of the NSA and Organizing Committee International Webinar, express our sincere, heartfelt gratitude to Sri Nifirio, Honorable Chief Minister, Government of Nagaland, for spending your precious time with us in spite of your heavy and tight schedule while gracing the occasion. Sir, your presence means a lot to us. We look forward to your leadership even in the days to come. I express our heartfelt thankfulness to Professor Paul Pimomo, Emeritus Professor, Central Washington University, for delivering the keynote address. I'm sure he has opened up for wider deliberation and discourse while covering the core of the international webinar theme. Lastly, thanks to NSA President and his esteemed colleagues, organizing committee, and to all the participants. Thank you, one and all.
Thank you, Dr. Kaiser, for the very brief vote of thanks. I'd like to make an announcement before we close. Right after this inaugural session, there will be a plenary session from 2 p.m. And the plenary session at 2 p.m. will be followed by 3 technical sessions today. However, on day 2 and 3 of the webinar, which is tomorrow and day after, there will be parallel sessions. A single session at a time would have been ideal, as it would ensure maximum audience, but the number of quality papers received meant we had to create these parallel sessions to accommodate them all within the 3-day schedule of the conference. So participants may see the program leaflet to decide which session to attend and accordingly enter the Zoom ID and password for that session. In case of difficulty to log into a particular session of your choosing, kindly contact the session organizer, whose name is provided in the program. So please take note and please consult the program leaflet for more details. Thank you very much, everybody, for participating in this first ever international 3-day webinar of the Naga Scholars Association. We look forward to your participation in the session to come and also tomorrow and day after. So I would like to give the time to our president to maybe say a few words to close this inaugural program.
Okay, thank you very much, Shelmy, for for very efficiently managing the inaugural session. Thank you very much on behalf of Naga Scholars Association. Well, at 2 p.m. today, we are going to have a panel discussion on civil society, uh, social transformation, and conflict resolution. This is going to be a very, very important plenary session. We have invited one of the leading scholars in this country, like Professor Neera Chandok, who is also considered as one of the public intellectuals in India. So, and moreover, it will also be, like we also have uh, Professor Sanjay Hazarika, who actually needs no introduction, as he's also very familiar to all of us. So I would like to request all of you to stay, join us for the coming session. This particular link will not, it will go on live, like started at 11:30 till 9 p.m. This live setting will go on for today. So today we are having on a single link. And I would like to make an announcement that if you look at the program, the file attached, which we have already circulated among the members and participants, you will see that right below the sub-themes, there it is mentioned the meeting, the Zoom meeting ID and the password. And just below that, if you click there, it will directly take you to the session which you would like to attend. So please see that. I also would like to apologize something which we have overlooked. That is on date 28, there is a little typing mistake which we will rectify tonight, and it will be recirculated. But do not get confused. Please make sure that you go through the file attached. You make sure that when you look at the sub-theme, below it is mentioned the meeting ID, the password, and below there, the link is also being attached. So when you click there, it will directly take you to any session that you would like to attend. So with this, I would like to end, and I would like to thank all of you for taking out your time and joining us. And please do not fail to attend the coming session, especially the immediate session which we are having now. Professor Neera Chandok and Sanjay Hazarika on civil society, social transformation, and conflict resolution, a panel, a plenary session. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you so much, Professor Paul. As
Oh
expected,
yes,
right,
uh,
yes, very
th
erudite and engaging.
And a very huge thanks to our Professor Paul, our keynote speaker, for delivering such a profound, such a profound keynote address. Yeah.
I think we can now break. We have 1 hour before the next session, before the next plenary.
Yes,
So
we can take a break now.
those of us in the cities, I think 1 p.m. is lunchtime. You know, those in the homeland, I'm sure you must be hungry for the second time, but have, something yeah, to fill your stomach and keep you energized until the plenary starts. So hope to see you all in the plenary at 2 p.m. So goodbye and take care for now.